Welcome to Dr. Hazel Brown's The Science of Coffee. Create your perfect cup. Today we're going to talk about the factors that go into crafting the ultimate brew and how you too can make your coffee at home the most delicious. Disclaimer, I am not a professional. I do not make coffee professionally. I am an amateur, simply seeking to hone my skills and pass along to you the small amount that I have learned, mostly from this book, which you can check out at the library. Let's talk about extraction. What is it? What does it mean? So, all it is the process of pulling flavor and texture from the grounds and into your cup. Extraction. You'll probably hear this term often when you're talking about the flavor of coffee, because over-extracted coffee tends to be too bitter, and under-extracted coffee can be too fruity or sour. Ideally, for you, depending on your own flavor preferences, you'll find a middle ground. Also, when you're brewing, the process of agitation, which is literally just moving the grounds around, can speed up extraction. So the strength of your coffee is the total dissolved amount of solids. When you brew coffee, that is, when you run your water through the grounds, it extracts oil and other, smaller particles from the coffee. So the strength refers to, if you have stronger coffee, it's going to have a heavier or grittier mouthfeel in comparison to weak coffee, which will have less extracted material from the grounds. So an ideal brew ratio that you can start out with is 1 to 15 or 1 to 17, somewhere in between. And that's the ratio of whole beans to water measured by grams, usually. A 1 tablespoon is generally around 8 grams of ground coffee, but you can have more consistency if you measure by weight instead of by volume because of the variability in grind size or bean size. So 1 tablespoon one day is not always going to be the same amount of coffee if you happen to grind it differently. So that's why we're going to go by grams in most of the video, but you can feel free to use tablespoons at home. So in addition to the brew ratio, the dose is the amount of coffee that's actually part of that ratio. So let's talk about grind size. Woohoo! Finer grinds, or finer grounds, is a greater surface area, which means you get a higher amount of extraction. However, it's not going to necessarily brew faster because the finer grounds tend to compact more. Think of it as water flowing through gravel versus water flowing through sand, which is going to happen faster. And kind of have that mental image when you're choosing your grind size. Generally, for cold brew, you'll use a larger grind size and have a much longer extraction time. Another thing that can impact the flavor of your coffee is your water, surprisingly. Coffee is actually almost 98 to 99% water, so that can definitely have a big impact. Think about the water in your home, if you use a water softener, if you have hard or soft water. And you want to keep it, the ideal temperature for brewing a hot cup is going to be just below boiling. So around 195 to 205 degrees Fahrenheit. Alright, so a couple of different methods for brewing your coffee are full immersion, which counts as the French press and the AeroPress, versus a pour over. We're not actually going to talk about the lovely coffee pot since we don't have as much control over the brewing time and the way that the water flows through the grounds. And a word on filters. Metal filters do not trap the oil that's naturally present in coffee grounds. And so if you use a metal filter, it can create a heavier or stronger cup, using the word that we learned earlier, versus paper filters can create a perhaps cleaner or weaker cup. So keep that in mind when making your coffee according to your preference, if you like a heavier or a lighter cup. In addition, when using a paper filter, you should wet it down because that creates a seal kind of around the inside edge, and that affects the way that the brew is going to happen in your pour over device. When you're making your cup, your pour over, now that you've got your water the perfect temp, you've got the right grind size, everything's ready to go, and you've even wet your filter down, you want to make sure that you pour in the right way. So when you're pouring, you want to move it around a little bit, but to prevent creating a channel where the water will just all go straight through and move the grounds away from that, because then you only end up pouring your water into a small amount of grounds. You also want to make sure that the fines, or the really, really finely ground particles, actually do end up on the sides of the cup as you pour. So don't pour directly onto the sides, otherwise the coffee will start to compact more into the filter and it won't extract properly or fast enough for your brew. So yeah, you want to go in a nice circular motion, not favoring one spot or another, and keep it even. Yes. Now that we've learned all about our coffee and some of the factors that can affect the taste, we're going to try brewing some. So what we're going to use today is an AeroPress, and we're going to try a recipe from this book. So we're going to start with about 11.5 grams, or around 2 tablespoons of freshly ground coffee of our library coffee brand. There we go. Onto our wet filter. Okay, we've got our water that was recently boiled and has slightly cooled. And we're going to add until the water reaches the number 2. And we're going to gently stir it to make sure that the grounds are saturated. All right, and we're going to use this for 20 to 60 seconds. want, you can use a stopwatch and keep track of how much time it takes you to push this down, so you can adjust the amount of time and therefore adjust the flavor of your cup. So now that you know some of the science behind coffee and brewing methods, go ahead and make your own cup and let us know how it tastes. Thanks for tuning in.